the purpose for the lecture today is just to show you how to be able to create these colored models. You want to make sure that you contact your reseller so that a particular is called a flag is added to your configuration file within the Exocad software. Looks like this, and that will allow you now to export colors with your models. Okay, so we're going to jump directly into the model creator. We're not going to go to design, so we can skip the whole crown design process, and we'll start from the model creation. So the very first thing we want to decide is what type of model we want to create. Do we want to have a Geller style model where you can extract the dies from inside the model? Or do you want to create a solid model that has the preps in it, but also the individual dies that you can print separately? Now, I know this from experience, there's a lot of, let's call it trauma, from trying to print these removable dies because of the accuracy issues. Okay, but that is a problem that is very much solved by Stratasys and their printers. So I will show you the workflow how to create the removable dies, but I'll show you exactly where you can go if you don't want to go that route, if you want to create a solid model with the individual dies. So all that is decided in this very first step. All right, so the two options that I mentioned right now, those are the ones I'm going to point out. If you select plateless, we'll select plateless model for either one, but here it's where you get to select. If you say cutout dies, then we're going to have a Geller style model, so we'll be able to remove the dies from inside of the model. If you don't want to do that, then you will select with extra dies, and it'll create an STL for each individual prep that you can print on its own. Okay, so for the sake of demo, we'll select the cutout dies. The next thing to determine here is how tall of a model do we want, and so by moving this model height, we can change that size. If you make it too short, then the software is not going to be able to create the shafts necessary for the removable dies. So you will get an error, and it'll bring you back to this point where you will have to change the size again. So for the sake of demo, I'm just going to go on the safe side of things and make it taller than I would typically need it. Also notice that there are some presets for the Stratasys printers. So depending on which one you're trying to utilize, it'll give you the different materials that you can select from. And then all the manufacturer parameters that they suggest will be assumed by the software. So you won't have to worry about changing any of them. So we'll go to the next step. The software brings us here to see if we can, if we have to make any edits to the model. We don't. And so now it'll go through the margin detection process. Now, because it is a demo case, all the margins have already been drawn. So I'm going to have the software detect all of them, and we'll move forward. Now here, the software asks if we want, which teeth we want to make a removable die off of. And so this actually becomes very useful because perhaps for some insertion direction problem, I want to be able to remove these canine. So I can tell the software, I also want to make the canine removable, even though it is not a prep tooth. So just know that that can be done. All right, for the second demo, we're not going to do it. We'll just go on to the next step. And so now the next thing to worry or concern ourselves with is the insertion direction for those dies. And here we want to be very careful. Typically, there's going to be, the scan data is going to have a pretty drastic curvature here, either because it's missing or just because of the shape of the bone. And so you want to make sure that your insertion direction is going along the orientation of the model. If I was to move this die this way, okay, you have to picture the shaft following that same exact direction opposite of the arrow. And so if it's too facial because of either the scan data or the position, what the software is going to have to do is add some random material to the facial of the model to make sure that there's enough thickness around the die for you to be able to take it in and out. So be very careful about it. For the sake of demo, I am going to do that for that die only, and I'm going to make the other ones as correct as I think they should be. Okay, so I'm trying to follow the general direction of the scan data, and then you'll see what happens to that central there. Okay, so now we have a lot of parameters here that we can focus on. Now, Exocad did something that I think is absolutely genius. If you hover your cursor over the parameter that you have questions about, it'll give you that little animation on what it is that you're changing. So the pin height is how deep do you want that seat to be, and so on and so forth. So you can see all of these parameters that you can change. Now, once again, if you're using the presets from Stratasys, you should not change any of these. Just print with the default parameters that it gives you, and you should get the correct fit. Okay, so let's go here to settings. Here's where we can select from the different materials if there were any options. And so now we'll go ahead and go to the next step. Okay, so you can see how that pin is going to come through the model because of the insertion direction that I selected. And so now the software has to add that extra bit of material there, completely destroying the look of my model. And so that's one thing you want to pay attention to in that step. So let me go back and fix that, or my OCD will not allow me to move forward. And then, all right, so this is what I wanted to show. By not changing the insertion direction, the software will create the shaft of the die is going to poke out of the facial, and the software will have to add all kinds of material here, completely destroying the anatomy that was there. So you want to make sure that your insertion direction is going with the orientation of the model. So right now we change that, it gets tucked in, and so now our model is going to look a lot better. All right, so now that we have our model created, we can see there, and just to show, we can bring this cut view tool, and you can see the space there for between the die and the rest of the model. So things should slide in and out, no problem. So we'll go to the next step, and now the software will ask us to create a model of the lower. So we'll just go with the defaults, click next. And then the last thing to go over is the possibility of putting attachments to the model. So the software has a bunch of different attachments that you can select from. So let's just, for the sake of demo, select something very simple, like a support pin. We can place those wherever we need them on the model. Let's just do those two. Let's do 3 like this. Okay, and we can play with the parameters here, whether we want, for example, the diameter to be bigger for more strength. And that ledge tends to be, if you leave it where it is, tends to be a little too thin. So you can increase the size of that ledge so that it's a stronger attachment. And then that would be about it. Now, the last thing I'll show is you can add text. So if you want to put the name of the patient here so you don't get the models confused, you can do that. And you can place it there for the models. And then you'll click next, and that will be the end of the design process. And then the software, as you can see, exported our models out with the color, and it should print just as you see it here.